Podcasting from Portland East to Portland West, from Big Pine Key to Pacific Beach, and from San Juan to Guam, this is All Across America. Dr. Amy Attas, thank you for having me by your home.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
And I think this is very apt, very fitting. I'm a podcaster making a house call to a veterinarian who makes house calls.
Exactly. We kind of do the same thing with a little bit of a different twist.
A little bit of a different twist. So what you do could be considered a throwback, but in the times that we live in, particularly in the city, particularly in Manhattan, you've got DoorDash, TaskRabbit, you can have anything delivered to your door. You're ahead of your time. I mean, this is as modern of a thing as can be, but you've been at it for 30 years.
I have been doing this, you're right, for 3 decades. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the backstory because it's not like I had this grand business plan to deliver veterinary services to my clients. I started my professional career at the Animal Medical Center, a hospital in Manhattan that's 8 stories tall and looks a lot like a human hospital. Surgery department, oncology department, radiology department, etc. And I finished at the end of that year. It was an internship, learned about 5 years worth of clinical medicine in 1 year, really, really worked hard. And then I went into a regular small animal hospital that happened to be on Park Avenue. And the thing that was nice about this hospital, we tended to work with very affluent clients. And in veterinary medicine, the people have to be able to afford veterinary care. Otherwise, all this wonderful training that we have, we can't put to use.
Right.
So I had the blessing of having wonderful clients who would say things like, as long as it's in the best interest of my pet, please do whatever you can to make my pet better. Yeah. I was super happy there. I thought I would stay there forever. I was a salaried employee. I worked really hard. I made my boss a lot of money. And then on our 4th anniversary, when he said he was taking me out to dinner to what he knew was my favorite restaurant, he made a whole big thing about taking me to my favorite restaurant. At the end of the day, he said, "You're fired. Take all of your personal belongings and leave now." I was particularly miffed that he made me work.
Miffed would be a very polite way of saying.
Well, it hadn't even sunk in that he had fired me, but what I was miffed about was, if you're going to fire me, why'd you make me work the whole day? Why didn't you just tell me first thing in the morning? So I didn't have a job, but more important, what he had just done, I thought was going to damage my reputation. The next morning, 2 clients called me at home and said their pets were sick, that I needed to see them, and I didn't have a hospital to go to. I made 2 house calls on day 1. On day 2, I made 4 house calls. All of a sudden, I'm thinking, am I on to something? And I enjoyed those 6 house calls so much more than I ever enjoyed working in a hospital. It was so personal. I was in my client's home. I was witness to everything about them. Their pets were so much calmer. So now we fast forward to what's Amy going to do about her reputation. I hired a labor lawyer who said, "This is really a sad story, but you don't have a great case, and if I take it, you're going to have to pay me out of pocket." Right. But my point was, I got fired because my boss was jealous. All of these wealthy, connected, famous celebrity clients of the practice had started asking for Amy. And I believe it was Joan Rivers herself who literally got me fired, sitting in the waiting room with her little dog. And my boss came out and said, "Miss Rivers, you don't have to wait. I'm available now." She said, No, thank you. I'm going to wait for Amy until she's done. And smoke was coming out of his ears. Yeah. So he felt his ego was affronted. Right. And he felt, if I fire her, I'll keep all my clients.
I see.
And they all came with me.
So, I mean, this was deliberately done, strategically done.
To pull the wool out from underneath me.
Okay.
And just an interesting aside, I wound up winning that case. And
So you took it to court?
Oh, went to court. 3-week jury trial.
Whoa, okay.
And at the end, I won both compensatory and punitive damages. They found that he acted with malice, which meant that his insurance company would not cover his fees or the payout.
Wow.
And it was a real practice builder because the judge and the jury forewoman both became my clients. So I really like to share that story because it's an example of, one of the major obstacles, and there have been so many in getting to where I am.
Yeah.
And, each time something like that happened, I just, said to myself, what can I do to make this better? Yeah. So it's not been like an easy ride,
right.
but it was all worth it. So I made case law in veterinary medicine.
Wow.
And I think it's been an inspiration for a lot of young, especially female veterinarians.
Okay.
And interestingly, I've gotten calls from other women professionals who've gone through the same thing and given them a pep talk about
wow.
It can be even better on the other side.
And so are there other folks doing what you do in the city or in other cities in the United States that you've been in touch with? Or
So it depends on the timing that you're asking the question. When I first started, no, there were not other folks. There were a couple of people who dabbled in house calls. There was a famous Dr. Louis Camudi, and he would go out and do house calls at night. And his wife would drive him, and he would go around. And he liked it because there was no traffic. But that's seeing 2 or 3 patients a day. I can see 15 to 20 patients a day. So I've got this house call thing down pat. So once I started, and again, looking at each obstacle, how can I make this better? So 30 years ago, there was no Uber or Lyft. So I was taking buses and subways and taxis. Trying to get a taxi at rush hour in the rain, it's almost like you're putting your life on the line.
Forget about it.
Yeah, people have no respect. And so, I'd come home at the end of each day and I would say to my husband, oh, the problems we had today. And my husband, Steve, is a problem solver. And he'd say, okay, well, how can we fix this? And right from the very beginning, he said, we're hiring a driver. I said, Steve, you're crazy. This is a brand new business. I don't know if we're going to make any money doing this. It's a novel idea. How in the world can I afford a driver? And his point was, you can't afford not to have a driver. You come home exhausted. You're soaking wet in the rain.
Right.
What are we going to do when it starts snowing? Because it was really early on in the practice. So I did hire a driver. And it was like an immediate change in how much more efficient I could be and how many more cases I could see. So it was just looking at whatever obstacle I had and how I could make it better. So all of a sudden now I've gone from dabbling in house calls to really doing house calls as a professional practice. And I got the attention of a lot of other veterinarians who were thinking, wow, this doesn't have a high barrier to entry. I don't have to rent a space. I don't have to buy equipment. They were naive in understanding what the barrier to entry was. It is really hard to do all of this on the fly. Like my office at that time was the back seat of a car.
Right.
I ate all my meals in the back seat of the car. I was making my phone calls from the back seat, and I was making phone calls with the first generation of cellular phones.
Right. The bricks.
The bricks where I would literally say to myself, oh my God, that cost $10. We paid per minute back then. So initially I thought, I'll just make some phone calls from my clients' houses. And I wound up getting every cold every family had from using their telephones.
Receiver, I've heard that, yes.
They're like really nasty. Do not use other people's phones. So again, we just looked at what obstacles. Now, to get back to your question, are other people doing it? A few people contacted me and said, do you mind if I ride along with you to see what it's like? And I always felt like there's more than enough business for everyone, and I took some people out with me. Most of them said, there's no way in the world I could do this.
It's not for everybody.
I can't imagine. And the things that you can't even imagine that you would want in the middle of the day. For example, pardon me, but you have to plan on where you're going to go to the bathroom. Because it's not always appropriate to ask someone.
Right.
And again, there are days when the opening of the UN General Assembly and you sit in traffic for hours and everybody's yelling at you while you're late. So as people witnessed what it was like, most of them dropped out. But I do have a bit of competition now, but no one who has taken it to the level that I have with City Pets, We are 3 veterinarians. We're a bunch of nurses.
Oh, wow.
We have an official office.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes, and it looks a lot like an office
Right.
because it's not an animal hospital, but there's administrative assistants and, probably 5 people at any given time are working in the office while the team is out on the road.
And does anybody actually bring their pets into the office, or is it purely more of an administrative?
Well, don't tell my landlord, but people do bring their pets into the office in certain situations. I have clients who have moved out of New York, and they still want me to see their pets.
Oh, wow.
So they will bring their pets to the office, and I'll see them there. But I wouldn't start with a new client in the office.
Right, okay.
We do house calls.
I mean, and it makes so much sense. One, I go see the doctor, I just walk on my own 2 feet. When you have a pet, you've got to either, particularly in the city, you've got to carry them, you've got to transport. They're outside of their comfort zone in an office. But then when you're coming into their home, that is their territory. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So at first I want to expand on what you talked about, some of the advantages. A lot of New Yorkers don't have cars.
Right.
So that means getting an Uber or a taxi, and many of them don't allow pets to come in their car. So there's a hardship of getting there. It's also a lot of time, right? You have to go in the car, sit in the waiting room, have your pet examined, etc. And the animals get very nervous, particularly the cats. They're in a cat carrier, they're sitting in a waiting room, and there are barking dogs. It is absolutely not a cat's favorite place to be. Now, I'm not saying my patients love me, because I do stick them with needles and touch them in places that they don't love.
Yeah.
But the whole experience is a lot less stressful. It's less stressful for the clients because they're home and they're not wasting any time.
Yeah.
It's less stressful for the pets because there's no anticipation of going to the vet's office. They know when they get to the street where the vet hospital is exactly where they're going.
Okay.
They don't know that I'm coming.
Right.
There are a few exceptions to that. Some people will tell me that their dog got nervous before the doorman even buzzed up. They know I'm in the building.
Wow.
Some people will tell me, my dog acted like you were here yesterday, and little did they know I was in that building yesterday.
Wow.
So their senses are amazing.
Yeah.
And the cats, who, again, don't love what I do to them, but it's 15 minutes versus an hour of stress.
Yeah.
So I see pets at a much more natural condition than you would see in the animal hospital. Their temperatures are normal, where they might be elevated from stress in the hospital. Their blood pressures are normal, where they're elevated. And this is really interesting. Blood glucose can be extremely high in a stressed cat. And that makes you wonder, is this cat sick or is it just stress?
I mean, so you're talking possibility of misdiagnosis.
Or added diagnostic fees trying to differentiate if this is real or if this is just stress. So I really do see a much happier patient at home. Now, I will tell you that sometimes I'll knock on the door and the dog is barking and the door opens, they're wagging their tail, and then they're like, uh-oh, I know her. And then the tail goes down, they run in the other room.
Right.
So they get who I am, but again, I'm stressing it's a lot less time that they're uncomfortable.
Okay. And so you've talked about in the book, cats tend to be much harder to chase down. You're often doing examinations in bathrooms.
Yeah, I do spend a lot of time in bathrooms. So you need to think like a cat. All right. And a cat who wants to get away is going to look for a hiding place that's either in something or on top of something.
Okay.
So I have climbed kitchen counters to get cats from on top of refrigerators, and that's really a dangerous thing to do. First of all, 4.5 feet up in the air. And second of all, a cat that doesn't want to be caught is going to start swiping at you. So we don't want to get scratched, we don't want to get bitten, and we certainly don't want to start examining a cat that's in this fractious state.
Yeah.
So the best thing to do is to put them in a confined area, and a confined area that doesn't have access to a place where it's hard to get them. Yeah. So if we confine them to the bedroom and they can get under the bed, then I'm under the bed trying to get a cat out who's swatting at me, trying to scratch me. Bathrooms offer very few hiding spaces. And sometimes I feel like I've done half of what I need to do and it's time to give the cat a break. So if I let them go, where are they going to go? Into the bathtub? That's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I can catch them.
Yeah.
So I find that the experience is a lot less stressful for the cat and a lot safer for the vet and my assistant if we have them in that area. So, little caveat. I mean, I'm in people's personal spaces, and I will share with you that some bathrooms are nicer and some bathrooms are cleaner than others. So you really do see the whole gamut when you make house calls.
I mean, and it's got to be the fascinating thing about it. My wife used to work for the Episcopal school on the Upper East Side, and they would do home visits earlier in the year. And these were preschool students, and that was one of her favorite parts of the year because you get to see how people live, and in this particular case, generally very, very wealthy people. I mean, does it surprise you sometimes when you could be in a fancy apartment building and the home is a mess, or vice versa?
It surprises me every day what I see. Let me start by saying I don't just show up and make a house call. Someone has made an appointment.
Right.
They are expecting me.
They know you're coming.
What are they thinking? So let's start with crazy things. Not all of my clients, by the way, are home, right? Sometimes they know us, the doorman lets us in or whatever. Yeah. So on a particular house call, on a day when the client was not home, I'm working in the kitchen and there are stacks of $100 bills on the counter. Why would you leave that out? It makes me extremely uncomfortable. I mean,
nervous,
what if they counted incorrectly in the morning and then at the end of the day they say, oh, X number of dollars are missing? So that's something that does make me uncomfortable. They leave jewelry out. They leave personal things that I would prefer not to see. And it just, I guess sometimes I think, I'm the person who takes care of the dog or the cat. I'm a service provider.
Right.
They would not leave that out if their friends were coming over, but maybe I'm invisible.
You wonder how what the thought process is there. Or maybe you would be surprised and they leave it out when their friends come.
You might be right. So I have seen crazy things.
So, I mean, you're an esteemed veterinarian. You have a lovely home and place in the city, and by all means, very successful. However, there's always somebody more successful, wealthier. Does it sometimes, when you're in the apartment of a billionaire, does it make you feel jealous in any way, or how does that feel?
I think when I first started out, and I was exposed to extraordinary wealth that I couldn't even imagine, I was just awestruck and said, oh my God, this apartment, I would love to live in this apartment. And the art that I see and the cars and the jewelry. But as I got to know these people, I realized I'm a lot happier than they are. I will keep my life and my problems and let them have their lives and their problems. And, the success that I have as a veterinarian is it's pretty good for what veterinarians make. As a rule, this profession does not make a lot of money. Okay. And I certainly can't even compare to what my colleagues in human medicine make. Right. But fortunately, my mother taught me something very important when I was a little girl, and she said it's just as easy to fall in love with a rich man as it is a poor man. So my lifestyle is really, my husband is extremely successful, and so that makes us have a wonderful lifestyle. But in veterinary medicine, sometimes I think about the number of hours I work per day, per week, and the remuneration just... It's not on par with other professions. Really? And I'm lucky because I own my practice. Right. But for people who are just coming out of school and getting their first jobs with debt for going to vet school that can be over $250,000, wow, they're never going to see for years a time when they have money in the bank.
And how many years is vet school?
Vet school is 4 years. Okay. So it's undergraduate of 4 years and then veterinary school of 4 years. Some people like me go on to do an internship, which is another year of intense learning. Wow. You get paid for that internship, but when I did it, I got paid $12,000 that year.
Wow.
In
Big
Manhattan,
bucks.
it didn't cover my rent.
Yeah.
So this is not a profession that people go into to make a lot of money,
Right.
which is contrary to what our clients feel, because they look at their vet bills and think, oh my God,
Wow.
it's so expensive. But again, the education that these students have, the equipment, the diagnostics, everything we're doing is quite similar to what's going on in human
Right.
medicine
Right.
and quite expensive. But most people have insurance that covers their own bills, and we're just starting to see health insurance catch on for pets.
Right. So the concept of pet insurance. I mean, and then of course there's Medicare and Medicaid, which doesn't exist for pet. And I mean, it is. And I think in the book you were talking about folks having a financial plan for their pets. And I think you're in a fortunate situation where many of your clients are wealthy and it isn't an issue. But I guess in a lot of cases, families will elect to maybe put the pet to sleep because they can't afford, the years of care and multiple shots.
Yeah, so it's probably the saddest thing I have to deal with, which is a problem that can be fixed and the client can't afford it to be done. There are some agencies that will help with that and will try and hook people up. I once had a conversation in a client's home. I said to my client, a very wealthy man, please excuse me, I just took a call from someone whose pet is sick. It's going to take me a few minutes, and then your cat will have my undivided attention. And the conversation was about how we were going to treat this pet that was very sick. And the client asked for an estimate of what it would cost to do the gold standard, a little bit lesser care, and even what it would cost to put the pet to sleep. And as I answered the questions, they said they would think about it and they would get back to me. When I went back to the client whose home I was in to start working with his cat, he asked me, Dr. Amy, can those people not afford their pet's care? And I said, they're figuring it out. They don't know if they can, spend what it would be to really completely cure the problem. He said, please call them when you're done and tell them I will pay for it.
Wow.
So that was like one of the most generous things that I'd ever heard from a client. But on the other hand, whatever it was, maybe it was $5,000, it didn't make a difference to him. He had so much money, and he cared so much about this client's pet that he just wanted to offer that.
That's great. Yeah.
So that was such a lovely experience. I could tell you other experiences that are on the other end where people who could afford chose not to.
Wow. And there once was, and I lived in the UK for a bit, and there was this campaign, a commercial campaign, that people would buy puppies for like a Christmas present. And the campaign was a puppy is not just for Christmas, and that people would buy these super cute puppies, and then months later, they would get much bigger and were very hard to care for, and they would give them away or bring them to a shelter. Can you talk about, I mean, it's when you have a pet, it's you have a responsibility, and it sounds like there are some people that don't understand or neglect that responsibility.
So my favorite client is the client who calls me and says, I'm thinking about getting a pet, before they have even looked at what they wanted.
Right.
And again, like I talk about in the book, my experience is the whole family experience, right? So I want to make the best possible relationship for this family and their pet. So we're going to have this discussion. Do you want a dog or a cat? Because those are the two species that I work with. And, they'll start telling me more of their story. Well, I leave the house really early in the morning and I don't come back until late at night and I go away for the weekends. I mean, this is not a family. This is not a household that should have a super active young dog.
Right.
Maybe we want to talk them into getting 2 cats so that they can enjoy their pets when they're home. Their pets will have each other when they're not home, and everybody will be happy. And I would encourage those people to get their pet from a shelter, because even though this isn't an ideal setting, if the people aren't home that frequently, we're getting 2 pets out of a shelter, and their life in this person's home will be a lot better than their life in a kennel in a shelter. When people tell me that they have a lot of time and they like to exercise a lot, they've got young kids, they're home, family goes together on the weekends, this is a much better fit for a dog. And then we start looking at what they like aesthetically. It doesn't have to be a purebred, but they might tell me that they like dogs that are 30 pounds, dogs with short hair. And then we start looking for what can we rescue. I encourage my people to rescue dogs.
Yes.
You can rescue a purebred dog. It doesn't have to be a mixed breed. There are lots and lots of options.
And you've talked about in the book that a lot of people think that rescues had behavioral issues, and that often is not the case.
So I think that rescues are rescues because it was just a mismatch with the family.
Right.
Every single pet I've ever had has been a rescue. I couldn't have loved them more. And I'm going to share with you a story that I told in the book about a very famous family who rescued a dog. Paul and Nancy McCartney called me and asked what kind of dog they should get. I had known Mrs. McCartney for many, many years, and her dog passed away, and she was thinking about different kinds of breeds. And what I explained was, Sir Paul is one of the most famous, most recognized people around the world, and he's known to be an animal rights person. If they were going to get a dog, if they could rescue a dog and then make that public knowledge, I think that would really encourage people to rescue. So they rescued Rosie. Rosie is a beautiful spirit. She's a Labrador Pit Bull mix. She weighs about 55 pounds. She is the sweetest, friendliest, most loving dog you can ever imagine. I don't think they could have bought a dog as wonderful as Rosie. And she's a real family member. And they love her so much. 2 years ago, they did the same thing again, and they rescued another dog. So if a rescue dog is good enough for Sir Paul McCartney, I think a rescue dog is good enough for all of us.
And you've really become a pet matchmaker.
Well, I think all lives are better with pets. We just have to find the right pet for the person.
Yeah.
I knew this very elderly woman, Mrs. Blum. I had known her for a very long time. She was in her 70s when I first met her, and she told me that she'd been recently widowed and she had gotten a little toy poodle puppy. Now, this probably wouldn't have been the match I would make. Older people with puppies, they're very high energy. Sometimes we like to do an older dog for an older person, but in any event, Mrs. Blum had an adorable little poodle puppy, Maggie. And I saw Maggie for her vaccines. I spayed Maggie. I took care of her ear infections, her skin infections, whatever. I'd been there a few times every year. And as Maggie and Mrs. Blum got older, I went a little more frequently. And when Mrs. Blum was in her 80s, she said to me one day, it's funny. I don't think I have any living friends or family any longer. So Maggie is like my sole companion.
Wow.
And then when she was in her late 80s, she said one day, just in passing, I think I've kept myself alive to care for Maggie. So now Mrs. Blum is in her 90s. Maggie is 18. Mrs. Blum calls to make an appointment, and the complaint was Maggie had stopped eating. So on my way to the house, I'm hoping that this is going to be something like a bad tooth or something I can easily fix. But of course, you know that it wasn't. And Maggie's blood work and her x-rays showed that she was in kidney failure and she was in heart failure at the same time. Each one of these is devastating, and together it's even worse because the treatment of kidney failure exacerbates heart failure. She was at a point where there was nothing I could do, and we were at the very end. And I explained this to Mrs. Blum, and I told her that I think the kindest thing to do at this time was to put Maggie to sleep. And she said that she just couldn't do that. And she asked me to take Maggie and put her in the hospital and do whatever I could for her. Of course, Maggie passed the next day in the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And I went to her home to give her the news in person, and she was absolutely devastated. When I left, I thought to myself, if it was true that she was really keeping herself alive for Maggie, what was going to happen to her? So I decided to go back and see her the next day. I knocked on the door. It took a really long time for her to answer. She was still in her nightgown. I had never seen her in a nightgown before. She hadn't brushed her hair and her teeth weren't in. And when I left that day, I thought to myself, she's going to die. I mean, it was Maggie. So I called every animal rescue organization I had ever done a favor for, and I said, I don't need an adoption. I need a dog to save someone's life. It needs to be old, it needs to be small, it needs to be sweet, and it needs to be stat. And I had a toy poodle named Pierre the next day. So I went back to her house. She was still in her nightgown. She hadn't brushed her hair, no teeth, and she looked even smaller than when I saw her before. So I made her a bowl of cereal. That was all she had in the kitchen because she couldn't remember when she ate last. And she said to me, I don't know why you have that dog here. You know I don't want another dog. I said, no, this dog is not for you. And I began telling her a series of lies I'd already planned in my head. And it went something like this. This little dog needs a home. I have to bring him someplace tomorrow, but I have no place to bring him tonight. And I don't want to put him into a shelter because something bad could happen to him in a shelter. And I can't bring him home. Could you just do me a favor? You don't have a dog. Could he just stay here tonight? One night. I'll be back first thing in the morning. I'll take him from you. This is a personal favor for me. And she said, I'll keep him for just one night. Come back first thing tomorrow morning. I did not come back first thing the next morning. I didn't go back till the end of the day. And I knocked on the door, and she answered a little more quickly. She was dressed. Her hair was brushed. Her teeth were in, and she had a little makeup on. And she had Pierre in her arms, and she asked if I could sit down and talk to her for a while. And she said that she knew I was going to come and take Pierre, and I was going to do something to find his forever home. But she realized that this dog really had special needs, and she thought that she herself was equipped for these special needs because she was home all day and she could provide him a very loving home. Pierre had no special needs. I suppressed the smile that was really wanting to come out on my face, and I took a few moments to let her think I was thinking about her suggestion. And I said to her, Mrs. Blum, I'll see what I can do to make this happen. And just on cue, Pierre licked her face. They were together for 2 years. Mrs. Blum died in her mid-90s, and I found Pierre his forever home. Wow. But this was a situation where my job as a veterinarian was more than just taking care of her dog. My job as a veterinarian was taking care of her. I never would have known that if I weren't intimate with her, being in her home over these past 18 years and watching what happened to her. Yeah. And this is what I think makes my job as a house call veterinarian so much more special than the wonderful job of being a veterinarian.
Right, because if she were coming to see you, she would be likely wearing makeup and would have to get out of her nightgown, and you would have a sense of how her home has evolved and how she normally keeps things. And
exactly. Or sometimes, when I worked in a regular hospital, some older people I didn't even meet because they would hire a pet taxi to bring their pets into the hospital because they weren't ambulatory enough. Right. But doing house calls, the clients are part of who I care for.
I mean, and don't the clients, and so speaking of, the client is the
clients
human,
are the humans, exactly.
The patient is the cat or the dog.
Exactly.
But cat and dogs can't communicate in the ways that we do, and so you really do need the client to be there to describe what's going on, no?
That was such a problem during the period of COVID when we continued to do house calls. We were in full PPE for every house call, and we did that for two main reasons. The first is, obviously, we didn't want to get sick from anything that people had, and I didn't want anyone to ever say to us, my family was fine until you came in to make the house call. So there was a lot of discarded PPE. And in order to do this safely, in the very beginning, I would spend a half an hour on the phone with the client, finding out answers to all of my questions. Then I would go into the home. They were not allowed to be with us.
I see. Okay.
Care for the pet. And then when I was finished, make a follow-up phone call. So everything took twice as long, but we were able to care for the pets and get all of the background information that we needed.
Wow.
I'm so glad that's over.
Yeah, I think so many people in so many respects. And I just can't imagine, lugging your equipment on top of the PPE. That just sounds torturous. And I was at the dentist yesterday, and I told him, I was like, "Oh, I'm going to be doing this podcast tomorrow with a veterinarian who does house calls." And he looks around his office and he just waves his hands, and he's like, "How do they do it? I have all this equipment. How can they bring all of their stuff in?" So it's almost like you're an ultralight backpacker. Do you have like miniature versions of?
So it's funny that you use that. We call it the Ascent Pack. We have a lot of stuff in the car, and our equipment is heavy, but every patient doesn't need every piece of equipment. Right. So we speak with the client in advance, and our Ascent Pack is pretty heavy. I mean, what I carry probably weighs 40 pounds, and my nurse the same. And sometimes we get up, we set everything up, and we realize once we've gotten the patient and we see a little bit more about what's going on, we don't have all we need. Yes, and that means we go back down to the car and get the rest of the equipment that we need.
A lot in common with contractors.
Exactly.
They come in, they've got their 4 sets of Milwaukee tools and 2 tool bags, and they go in to fix a leak, and inevitably it's back in the van.
It's funny that you say that, because I often call myself the general contractor. I go in and I look at the patient as a whole, which is something a little bit different than what happens in human medicine, where you have like an eye doctor, an ear doctor, a right pinky toe doctor. Right. I try to look at the whole patient. And then if I find that there's an eye problem, because I practice in New York City, and I have ophthalmologists, and I have dermatologists, and I have orthopedists, if there's a problem, I will recommend to the client that they can, if they choose, see a specialist. And I put all of that information together. I think that it just provides better medical care. Yeah. So that's my job as the general contractor. But we do go up with, machinery to do the basic exam, and then whatever else we need, we go get.
And do you feel, we were talking about patients and clients and the clients having to communicate for their animals, but do you feel that animals can communicate in a way that humans can learn from? Do you feel that you can communicate with pets in a way that maybe others can't?
So I 100% believe that we communicate with our animals non-verbally. Yeah. So there are dogs that I've seen over and over again for vaccines, and I show up at the house and they run away from me. And then I'll go because they're sick and they're standing right next to me. So I believe they know I'm there for them. Wow. And the same thing happens with cats. When they have chronic diseases and I go for their treatments, they no longer run away from me. They know I'm doing something for them. Okay. In terms of communication back and forth, anyone who's ever had a pet knows that your pet knows when you're upset. Yeah. They know when you're sad. They are all over you. I had a cat who would literally lick my tears when I cried. That was so comforting, even though her tongue was a little bit rough. It just, for me, it was an expression of emotion. Like, Mom, you're sad. I'm here for you. Yeah. So it's the most special bond.
There was a story in the book about I guess it was a psychic, and I had somebody on the show recently who was considered a psychic detective and has worked with countless municipalities, the FBI, internationally, in help solving crimes, and she's also is considered to be a pet psychic as well and can communicate with animals. And in this instance, maybe you can describe the story where this pet was missing.
So my client has 3 cats, and they rented a house on Long Island for the summer, and one of the cats got out of the house. And this was a cat who was used to living in an apartment, had no street smarts whatsoever. And they looked and they looked and they couldn't find the cat. Signs went up everywhere. The whole neighborhood was looking for the cat, and there was no sign of the cat. They put food out, and it only got eaten when the raccoons came by. And she was absolutely devastated. She didn't know what else to do, and she called me and she said, I think I'm going to call an animal psychic. Am I crazy? I said, you know what? Who am I to tell if somebody has an ability to know something that I don't know? Yeah. Do it. You have nothing to lose. So she calls the psychic, and the psychic asks her to describe her cat. And it was a really cute little cat, and it didn't have a tail. It was a Manx cat, and it had floppy ears. It was really a unique-looking little cat. And the psychic said, very interesting. Yes, I feel your cat. Your cat is safe. Your cat is not far from the house. is there a long road? And my client said, well, there's a driveway that's pretty long. She said, go to the end of the driveway, there's a hole. And they go to the end of the driveway, and there's an opening for the sewer. And they get a flashlight, and they look down at the sewer, and two green eyes stare back at them. The cat had gotten into the sewer. They got the fire department. They were able to go down. They rescued the cat. It was filthy, dirty, and it was fine.
Wow.
How in the world did this person know that the cat was in the sewer drain? Either the person is a psychic or the person put the cat in the sewer drain, and the second one just wasn't possible.
Yeah.
So I think there's powers out there that we don't understand.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in modern science is modern science, but there will be, 22nd century science and 23rd century science, and maybe some of what we know today will be seen as maybe a bit elementary. I mean, for instance, birds and how they migrate in their patterns. We don't quite know how they migrate, sometimes thousands, tens of thousands of miles. And
animals are amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the easiest and simplest way to put it.
Right. I mean, we've got monarch butterflies. We've got whales that go, from the top to the bottom. Yeah. They're just amazing.
Yeah, they really are. Can you talk about other concerns with pets and dangers? And I mean, grapes, butter. I had no idea.
Yeah. So left to their own devices, pets can get into trouble, so it's up to us to keep them safe.
Yeah.
So first of all, we have so many things that are potential dangers in our homes that I get to see making house calls, so I get to fix them. So let's start with things like dangling cords.
Yes.
If you have draperies or curtains that have cords, if people still have phones that hang down, they're fun to play with if you're a cat, and you bang them back and forth, and then maybe you rub against them, and then maybe your head gets inside. Think of the potential that could happen, and it does happen. Animals get injured from dangling cords. Flowers and plants can be extremely toxic. The most significant one are lilies. The lily flowers are so poisonous to cats that if they eat a part of the leaf, the stem, drink the water, they can be poisoned.
Oh my goodness.
So, people say to me, I put the lilies high up where my pet can't get them. But if one of the petals falls down, they're poisonous.
Wow.
So I go into homes sometimes where they have cats and the clients aren't home and they have lilies, and I throw them away. And I leave a big note, sorry, poisonous to cats.
Wow.
Chocolate is poisonous. Sometimes people leave little chocolates out on coffee tables. The dogs eat them. I mean, we have to know what's poisonous, and we have to protect our pets. Medicines that are over the counter that we take can be poisonous for pets. Don't give your pets medication until you clear it with your own veterinarian.
Human medication.
Human medication. Aspirin, Tylenol. One Tylenol will kill a cat. Wow. I had a client who chose to treat her dog with Tylenol, a big dog who had exercised too much and was limping. And she gave him Tylenol for a few days because she said, I don't want to pay Amy to come over and examine my dog. Ironically, she was a physician. So she thought, this is safe for people. I'll give it to my dog. That dog spent a week in the intensive care unit in liver failure and kidney failure. The dog made it, and it's fine, but that stupid mistake cost this dog a week in the ICU and probably $10,000.
Wow.
So no human medicine for pets. You want to be careful for any kind of pesticides and things like that you're using. You don't want to put toilet bowl freshener in your toilet if you have a big dog who sometimes likes to drink from the toilet.
Yes.
And then foods that we eat, as I mentioned, chocolate is very toxic to dogs. Grapes are very toxic to dogs. Certain types of nuts like macadamia nuts and raisins, all super toxic.
Well, I guess
raisins are grapes in their earlier life.
Dried grapes.
And one that I forgot to mention that we really need to make a big point about is fake sugar. The fake sugar called xylitol that is in our candies and gum, which tastes very sweet but doesn't have any calories. Dogs find it delicious. They will eat it. It causes an enormous surge in insulin in their bodies because a dog's body recognizes this as regular sugar, and they don't have any regular sugar. They have fake sugar, and it doesn't process the same way.
Okay.
If they eat a sufficient amount of it, it is fatal.
Wow.
And usually people tell me that the dogs go in their pocketbooks or in their coat pockets and find these things because it smells so good.
Oh, my goodness.
So just keep your home clear of all kinds of fake sugars.
Wow. And can you talk about falling?
Yes, I was just going to go there. Like today, the first beautiful day of spring or early summer, we want to get the fresh air in our homes, we open the windows. A lot of my clients live in tall buildings.
Yeah.
So they open the windows, they don't have screens in place. That fresh air is attractive for dogs and cats, and it is such a potential danger. The cat is sitting on the windowsill, maybe it gets a little nappy in the sunshine, falls asleep, and falls out the window. Or sometimes they think that they can catch the bird that they just saw, and they jump out the window. It is never safe to allow a pet onto a windowsill or a terrace. And I've had people argue with me and say, I've done this my whole life. Nothing's ever happened. Nothing ever happens until it happens.
It does, yeah.
And when it happens, it's devastating.
Yeah.
So I close windows and terrace doors in apartments. Yeah. And if people won't listen to me, I won't go back again. Because I had a client who argued with me that they had always done that. And I got to know their pet really well, and their pet fell off their terrace and died. And I thought, I don't want to lose a patient that I love unnecessarily. And so people have to hear me on this.
And now the cats can right themselves. And you wrote in the book that if they fall from, it's actually better in some instances when they fall from higher stories, not too high.
Of course. So I want to stress that this information came retrospectively. So when I worked at the Animal Medical Center, which at the time was the only emergency hospital open 24 hours in Manhattan, any pet that fell out the window at night would come to the Animal Medical Center. And these pets were seriously injured, and some of them arrived already deceased from their falls. So the doctors there, when we took our medical notes, we would indicate what happened. So the record would say something like fell from 20th story window. So as a retrospective study, when researchers went back and looked at what happened to the cats who fell out the window, and I'm stressing this because some people thought that this was a study done where animals were injured. No animals were injured.
Gotcha. Okay.
This happened on its own years before.
Right.
What we learned is that cats who fell from a low number of stories, they all died. Cats that fell from, for example, from the 5th floor to maybe the 9th floor, those cats didn't all die. They broke bones and they were injured. And cats that fell higher than that pretty much died. And what they realized is that the cats that fell a reasonable number of stories, they had an opportunity to turn themselves over, a phenomenon called righting yourself, so that they land on their feet. Of course, a cat would land on its feet. They're cats. So they injured themselves, but they didn't fall on their heads. They didn't fall on their backbones and immediately die. The ones who fell from lower stories, they didn't have an opportunity to do that. But in any event, let's have no cats die.
Yeah.
Everybody, keep your windows closed. If you must open your windows, put screens in that a cat cannot push out. Consider opening your windows from the top or leave the air conditioning on.
Yeah. One of the things I think being a doctor that's hardest for me to conceptualize, and obviously there is all of the education involved, but for me it's a responsibility. And it's not only the responsibility for making the right diagnosis and the right care plan, but it's also having to deliver the really tough news. And how do you do that?
It's really hard.
Yeah.
You know, people put a lot of faith in you, and that's why I try to do the best job I possibly can. Yeah. I don't have an ego. If I don't know what's wrong with a pet or things are not going the way that they should go based on my diagnosis and treatment, I will ask the client to take their pet to another veterinarian for a second opinion.
Okay.
I will typically go to as I mentioned, I'm the general contractor. There is board certification in veterinary medicine, people who go on further for education, even longer than I did. I did a 1-year internship. There were also residencies in veterinary medicine. And when you complete a residency and you sit for a board certification exam, then you're a specialist.
I see. Okay.
So if an orthopedic case isn't going the way that I expect it should go, I will ask them to see an orthopedist. If a cardiac case isn't going the way I want it to, I will ask them to see a cardiologist. You should not have ego in medicine, right?
Yeah.
Get a second opinion. Maybe this patient isn't going to get better, and maybe I've done everything properly, or maybe there's something that should be added that I don't know about. So that would be how I would handle a patient not getting better. Sometimes we're doing everything right and the patient doesn't get better. Or the diagnostics, like I talked about with Mrs. Blum, came back a kidney disease and heart disease that couldn't be treated. And then you're giving devastating news.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart. And I'll be honest and tell you, I cry along with the clients because I can't help but think, how would I feel if this were my pet?
Right.
And I have been the recipient of that news, and it really hurts.
Yeah.
And absolutely the worst of all is when it's a young pet. Because if it's an older pet, I try to stress, we know they don't live forever.
Yeah.
Please focus on all the wonderful years you've had together and try and ease some of the pain of the loss. But it's impossible to do that when it's a young pet.
And what's it like putting a pet to sleep? I mean, what is it like during and after? And
When I was a young vet and I was working at the Animal Medical Center, an older clinician observed as I put a pet to sleep. And the client was saying to his dog exactly what I would have said to my dog. And as the tears fell from his eyes, the tears fell from my eyes. And I completed the process, and the older clinician put his arm around me later on and said, "Don't worry, you'll get over that." And I thought to myself, the day that I get over that, I shouldn't be in this job any longer. So it really affects us profoundly when we do this. But one of the things I know is that the right place to say goodbye to your beloved pet, if at all possible, is in your own home, where you're free to express your emotions in any way you want, and the last experience your pet has is not going to the animal hospital and being put on a cold steel table.
Yeah.
They should be where they're comfortable. And especially if they know me, they don't have an extraordinary amount of stress. They have the normal stress. Oh, Amy's here.
Right.
So it's not that added stress. And I would say some of the nicest presents and most beautiful cards I have ever received are from people thanking me for how the most difficult day of their life was made so much easier by having it done at home. So we cry with them. Sometimes we leave and we cry afterwards. There's a lot of hugging going on because I've just been with someone on what will be one of the worst days of their lives.
Yeah, it's really hard. And you've seen, pets grow up and grow old and pass on. How has that affected your own, I think, sense of time and mortality?
It's funny that you asked that. I refer to it as the cycle of life for both the pets and the people.
Right.
So oftentimes I come to the home, the family has some little kids and a puppy, and then 18 years later, at the end of that dog's life, the little kids are now big kids. They go off, they get married, they get pets of their own, they have children, and it does really affect me where I say, I can't possibly be that old to see this little kid now be a mom. So, those are the markers in my life. I don't have children. So I didn't go through the kindergarten, graduation from high school, going off to college, watching them get married. I still think of myself as, a young whippersnapper.
Yes, of course.
But watching these families get older has been my marker of time.
Right. And is it strange in a way knowing the previous pet? They've had Pookie and now Mookie and now Snooky.
Well, sometimes it's Pookie and Pookie and Pookie. I mean, come on,
Pookie 1,
people,
2, and
let's
3.
please have a little originality. I do have a client who's named his cats, hear me out, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7.
Is this person an accountant?
He's brilliant and very good with mathematics, but I also think
Not in
he
a
thought
creative
that
profession.
was funny.
I mean, okay.
And so I have patient number 7.
Wow. And is there a difference? I mean, can you all, if somebody were to say, if you were to be shown a picture or a person was standing in front of you and you said they have a pet, would you be able to guess if they were a cat or a dog person and what sort of breed even?
So standing in front of me, no. I can't guess cat or dog person. I spend a few minutes talking to you, for sure I can tell if you're a cat or a dog person.
Really?
And then when you go to dog breeds and dog people, I think often you find people who get dogs who look like what they look like. I mean, your listeners won't know this, but I do look like a pug. And my father certainly looked like a pug. And then the other group of people get dogs who look like what they wish they looked like.
Interesting.
So,
projection.
Exactly.
I see. So a very, shall we say, heavy-set person might get a very svelte-looking...
Exactly.
And do you ever feel, and speaking of, I mean, is there a projection that people put onto their pets in some respects? And I remember a story from your book. There was a very beautiful, well-put-together, elegant woman who could not bear to hear that her dog would require a surgery which could make them disfigured.
So I used her as an example because she was the extreme. She was so beautiful, and the surgery that her dog needed would have made him, actually, ironically, the surgery would have made him less disfigured than he was with the tumor that he had on his mouth. But the thought to her, because the tumor happened slowly, she was used to it, the thought of having surgery that would remove a portion of his jaw was just so frightening to her that her dog would be disfigured. Eventually, she did allow the surgery, and because he was a Pekingese with long fur, the fur from the upper part of his jaw covered the lower part, and you couldn't even tell he was disfigured, although his tongue did stick out a little bit, which added to his charm. But it does happen that clients don't want to have a surgery that could either eliminate pain or cure a problem because of what their pet would look like afterwards. Wow. And for me, I've had a number of my rescue dogs who were less than 100% perfect. Yeah. So I've had 2 blind dogs who didn't know they were blind. They played with the big dogs. Amazing. They were wonderful. And I would often use them as an example for people. Don't put your fears onto your pet. Right. Even though your pet might have 3 legs after the surgery, it will be free of cancer and free of pain and will be able to go on and live happily. Yes, it will look a little different, but your pet won't care. Yeah. And until you make them realize that and they succumb and allow us to do what we need to do, their pets are uncomfortable. So there was a famous story of Joan Rivers, whose dog had bone cancer, and she didn't want me to amputate the dog's leg. And until I made her understand the dog was in pain and nothing I could do would eliminate the dog's pain. But after the amputation, we would stop the cancer and stop the pain. And we created little tutus that this dog would wear so she wouldn't see the surgical site. And she realized it was still her dog. She loved the dog and was so happy to have her for a number of years and free of pain.
The tutu sounds very on brand for a pet of Joan Rivers.
Exactly right. All different colors.
But you've been a real advocate for disabled pets, and you had a pug named Bumper.
Yeah, so Bumper was my first disabled pet. I was in veterinary school. I was late to class. I was running in, and I saw a pug tied to a tree. I have loved pugs since I was a little girl. That was the first dog we ever had. In fact, it's the only breed I've ever had. But it's not that I'm, going to pet stores and buying pugs. They've all been rescues. So this little dog was tied to a tree. I went over to pet him because I couldn't resist a pug. And I saw a note tacked to the tree. And it said, and I quote, "My name is Old Man. I am blind. Please take good care of me."
Wow.
So I untied the rope. I brought the dog into the veterinary hospital. I didn't know anything about veterinary medicine. I was still in my second year of vet school. I brought it to one of my clinical professors and I said, I just found this dog. So he did the examination and he said, the first thing, Amy, this dog is not old. He's very young. He is totally blind. He is probably blind because he came from a puppy mill. A puppy mill is a very nice way of saying factory farming of dogs. We shouldn't call it anything cute. This is complete exploitation of dogs. They breed these dogs over and over again in deplorable conditions, and they never vaccinate them. So my little Bumper probably had a disease called distemper. Distemper doesn't mean you have a bad temper. It means you have a neurologic virus that often kills puppies, but in Bumper's case, just made him blind. So now I have this dog who's healthy and blind. We take care of all of his vaccinations. And I said to this little dog, listen, I'm young, I'm single, I don't have a care in the world other than veterinary school. I can't keep you, but I will take you home tonight for one home-cooked meal, and then tomorrow I'll figure out what to do with him. So I brought him to my apartment. He bumped his way around everything, which was his way of learning the landscape, which is how he got the name Bumper rather than Old Man. And when we got back to the front door, he lifted his leg on my front door and voided the entire contents of his bladder in a way of saying, this is my territory. Well, I responded to that by saying, you're spending the night in the kitchen, and I left a little pile of towels for him, food and water, and barricaded the kitchen door. I woke up the next morning. Somehow he got out of the kitchen, found his way to my bedroom, jumped on the bed, and he was lying next to me. And I realized, I guess I found out what I'm going to do with you. So Bumper and I were together until the end of his life. He graduated veterinary school with me. He did my internship with me, moved to New York. And and Bumper was a dog who taught so many people how much you could love a dog that wasn't what we consider 100% perfect.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing in terms of pets that they really are demarcations of time. And I remember a neighbor of mine in Brooklyn whose cat had recently passed away, and she said, we drove over, and it was 18 years before, and she came from Michigan. When she first came to the city, the cat was next to her in the U-Haul when they were driving, and just that whole passage of time.
So interesting, passage of time and experiences. Sometimes people will tell me that, the pet belonged to their spouse who passed away.
Right.
There's a story about that in my book about a dog who I went to visit initially as a pre-euthanasia visit. It was the first time I had met this man. The dog had been under the care of another veterinarian who made a diagnosis and said that there was nothing that could be done. And when I started talking to the gentleman about what the prior diagnosis was and options, he said, well, that was never offered to me. So I made a treatment plan for him, repeated the blood work, and while I was talking to him, I learned that the dog was his wife's dog. This gentleman was in his 30s, and his wife had passed away a few years before of breast cancer. And I immediately knew that the loss of this dog was going to revisit all of the emotions of the loss of his wife. And I really felt that I had to do whatever I could to give him more time together. Yeah. And we did. And it wasn't a lot of time. It was 6 months, but it was 6 months of quality time that he didn't think he was going to have. Right. And that just really meant the world to me to let him have a little bit more of this special dog's time with him.
You talk a little bit in the book about the other side, which is the birthing process, that you don't really, as a city vet, have a lot of, or hadn't had a lot of experience. And you have delivered babies. I'd imagine most families in the city choose not to have litters and get their pets spayed and neutered. And
for sure, most of my patients are spayed and neutered. I do have a few male dogs who are not neutered. They're often working dogs. So that is a gene pool that we might want to continue with. But it's not easy to live with a female dog in the city who hasn't been spayed. So that typically is something that people take care of. Having said that, I have had a few people who wanted to breed their dogs. So I do recall one gentleman who had a Bernese Mountain Dog, and we had a litter of 13 puppies in a New York City apartment. The place was a complete mess. I don't know how his neighbors tolerated that, but he did find homes for all of those dogs. I do tell the story in the book of a woman who is still my client. She's Princess Marie Chantal of Greece. And when she was a young girl of maybe 13 or 14, her parents were my clients, and they had a little Shih Tzu dog who was pregnant, and I made a house call at midnight to deliver those puppies. Wow. So, but it's just, I think veterinarians in more rural areas have a lot more experience with delivering babies than I do.
And they also do, I mean, if you're a large animal veterinarian, that is, you make house calls. You're not bringing a cow into the vet's office.
So when I was applying to veterinary school, I got some experience working on a dairy farm, and the veterinarian would come to deliver any calf that was having difficulty being born. But pretty much the farmhands helped with that. And since I have very small hands, I was taught how to do that. So I delivered a lot of calves.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Now, I mean, in your profession, you see everything. I mean, you're in people's homes and, of course, pets and humans as well. There are excretions and smells and noises and sounds and fur. And, you know, most professionals, the dirtiest they're going to get is, I don't know, an ink stain from a signature on a contract. Do you feel that you're better able to roll with the punches, just given your profession?
We have to. So I want to remind everyone that I started on Park Avenue, where I used to wear a dress and high heels every day. And when I started doing house calls, I began like that and realized this is not appropriate attire to go under a bed to find a cat in. So we all wear uniforms. Yeah. We look professional. You know, they're branded City Pets. They're cute. My clients always want to buy the shirts that we wear. So at the end of the day, I look a lot different from how I looked at the beginning of the day. You're right. We get various fluids all over us, sometimes in large volume. And, you know, my nurses will say, nobody's going to want to sit next to me on the train tonight. So I try never to have an appointment directly after work without having time to go home and change.
Yeah, smart. Although on the New York City subway, that might be a good thing, not having people wanting to sit next to you. Have you seen the city change in 30 years?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Neighborhoods have changed, you know. Downtown, where we used to go, sometimes there were streets where we were a little nervous going to, and now those are some of the highest priced districts. So I've definitely witnessed the gentrification of a lot of the city. And what I also notice, which is really interesting from a veterinary point of view, the types of pets that we see in different parts of the city have changed.
Okay.
So on the Upper East Side, lots of dogs are doodles. Doodles are anything that's been crossed with a poodle to have a cute suffix of oodle. So Labradoodle, Golden Doodle, Bernedoodle, etc. Or now we even have the smaller ones that are the Cavapoo or the Schnoodle. So lots and lots of things that are bred with poodles. Downtown, Tribeca, Soho, the Frenchie. So lots and lots of French Bulldogs. French Bulldogs are now the #1 breed in the U.S.
Really?
So, I mean, an adorable breed, and I love them, but an unlikely breed to be the #1 breed because they are a pretty high-maintenance breed of dog.
Yeah.
Upper West Side, large mixed-breed dogs. So, you know, I can pretty much tell what part of Manhattan I'm in by looking at the dogs.
Right, okay.
And the cats are the same everywhere.
They are? Really? Okay. That I guess that shouldn't surprise me at all. And can you talk about French Bulldogs and various breeds, some being better than others? And I mean, you have had a series of pugs, and pugs, my understanding, can be high maintenance as well and require a lot of veterinary care.
So I think every breed has their own special issues. So remember, all dogs are the same species. And then what we do is we breed for characteristics that we like. And over hundreds of years, we've created all of these different breeds. And so when you're doing that, your gene pool is smaller, right? You're breeding like to like to like to like. So sometimes the same physical appearance comes with some medical issues.
Right.
So we know certain large breed dogs get hip dysplasia. We know certain breeds of dogs like Cocker Spaniels get cataracts. We know that dogs with pushed in faces have breathing problems.
Right.
So if you choose the aesthetic of a certain type of breed, you need to know what goes along with that so that you can provide the right household for it. So as you mentioned, I love the look of a pug dog. Pugs have a lot of medical problems. They have very large eyes that don't always close the whole way, so you have to do extra eye care. Also, they have flat noses and protruding eyes, so they're prone to eye injuries. Those flat noses of the pug, the Pekingese, the bulldog, the French bulldog, they have all the same apparatus inside of a large breed dog. It's just all squished together. So that's why they snore a little bit. And that's why they have trouble breathing in very hot weather. So for my patients that look like that, at the time that they're spayed or neutered and they're under general anesthesia for that surgical treatment, I will recommend that we actually trim some of that abundant tissue to give them an easier opportunity to breathe. So these dogs breathe better and they don't snore and they're a lot healthier. These dogs are also prone to gastric reflux. Who isn't these days? And sometimes we keep them on appropriate diets for that medication. And I always recommend that people raise up the food and water bowls. And this is my plug for all breeds to have their food and water bowls raised up, because who wants to eat in a downward angle where your stomach acid is starting to come into your esophagus?
I never thought of that. It makes perfect sense.
Pick up the food. We don't want to eat lying down.
Right.
Pick up the food and water, let them swallow it along with their stomach acid.
Okay. I never thought of that.
This is what I think about all day long. How do we keep our pets healthier?
Yeah. And what would you say for folks that are interested in becoming a veterinarian?
So I would say you need to have the fire in your belly. You don't want to be a veterinarian. It is a lot of schooling. It is extremely expensive. You can't even get in unless you're top of your class in everything. Grades, test scores, experiences. So it's a path that you should take if this is what you want to do more than anything. Because once you're doing it, you sometimes carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, right?
Yeah.
You're dealing with people who are extremely emotional. You're dealing with pets who are really sick. You have to make decisions to help them, and you have to keep up with continuing education, going to conferences, reading everything that you can. And you're going to do all of this and work all really, really hard. For me, truly, I don't take a day off. Even though I'm not seeing patients today, I've been on the phone with my clients in the morning. I'm going to make some more callbacks later on today.
Wow.
I do that because I want to do that.
Yeah.
Their pets are sick. If my pet was sick, I would be wanting a phone call to find out how the pet is doing, add a little therapy if I could, or give blood test results. And so it's a long day and a lot of stress. And you should only do this if you really want to do it. And if you really want to do it, congratulations, because you will have the best job in the world.
Yeah. It's and I think it's great advice for anything. I mean, anything rewarding, I think, is going to be particularly difficult. And the only real way to overcome that difficulty is having that great want and desire that comes from the heart. And nothing can replace that.
And you can't fake it.
You can't fake it.
Yeah.
And that's really it. So you've had many pets, but right now you don't.
Yeah. So let me explain my philosophy of pets. With firsthand knowledge, I know they don't live forever. So what I have always done is had more than one pet. And as one starts to get a little older, I'll bring in a second rescue. And this is the advice I give my clients, because we know as our pets get to be 8 or 9 years of age, maybe they get a little lazy, maybe they're sleeping all the time. But if you shake things up by bringing in another pet, they have competition. They're like, oh, wait a minute, is he playing with my toy? I want to play with my toy. So I think it makes them live longer and healthier.
Revitalizing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so many people have followed this advice and come back to say to me, thank you so much. My pet is so much better now. Wow. But the ulterior motive also is when that older pet does pass away, they're not left without any pets. They have the younger pet.
Yeah.
And then when that pet gets to be a certain age, they bring in another one.
Right.
This is my advice that I have followed my whole life. So a few years ago, my beloved Winston passed away. He had a cancer called hemangiosarcoma. He underwent chemotherapy. I promised him that the day that he told me he didn't want to do this any longer would be the day that we would say goodbye. We had a wonderful 8 months after he was diagnosed, and he passed away. My Cleopatra was devastated. Cleopatra was a little rescued black pug. She was probably about 12 at that point. Winston had been her big brother. She didn't smile. She didn't wag her tail. She was absolutely devastated. And Steve and I decided that even though we weren't ready, we were going to get a dog for her. So I contacted the Pug Rescue Organization, and they found me a little dog who we named Ermite. We named her Ermite because she acted like a hermit crab. She had so little confidence that she would dive under her dog bed. And when she wanted to drink water or eat, she would walk with the dog bed on top of her. She would come out to drink or eat and then dive underneath another dog bed. So we put dog beds all over the house. And it took her about 3 months to have full trust in us. And then she started to develop her personality. And she was a total character. And she and Cleopatra were the best of friends. Her name evolved from Ermite to Meatball because she was such a meatball, a total delight, a court jester, full of personality. She had obviously been abused before we got her. We fixed all of her medical problems, and she and Cleopatra were the best friends. And they were best friends for about 3.5 years. Cleopatra was 16 at that time. She had some medical issues, and she passed. The problem was Meatball developed a medical problem. It's a medical problem I deal with all the time, and I know how to treat. I diagnosed her. I treated her. She wasn't getting better. I said, you know what? I don't want to take care of my own dog. I brought her to friends of mine who were specialists. They said, Amy, you're doing everything right. They adjusted the treatment. She didn't respond. I brought her to the Animal Medical Center. I brought her to University of Pennsylvania. I brought her to Cornell. We started doing experimental treatments on her. She would not respond. 3 months to the day from when her sister passed away, she passed away, and she was young. And we are still devastated. So I know it's going to happen. Yeah. I know it's going to happen organically, that someone's going to reach out to me and say, Amy, we have a pug. We know you love pugs. This pug has a problem. Can you fix it? And I'll fix it, and I'll keep it the way that I've done for everyone else. But I'm not yet ready to make that step to reach out, because a day doesn't go by that I don't cry for my girls that I've lost. So, and our house is very empty right now, but it will change. Yeah. I just don't know when.
Yeah. Well, anything you'd like to leave us with? Anything that I didn't ask? Any words of advice for pet owners or prospective pet owners?
Well, for pet owners, I want to just remind you, never miss a day of telling your pet that you love them. Find something that they love more than anything, whether it's a behavior, an activity, a walk, a special treat, and share that with them every day so that they know how much you love them. And for potential pet people, pets change your lives in so many ways for the better. Yeah. Just choose the right one for you and your family.
Yeah. You wrote about who's getting rescued.
Well, I know that my next rescue will rescue me, because I know that I will smile much more once that happens. Yeah, I believe they rescue us too.
Oh, wow. Well, the name of the book is Pets in the City, True Tales of a Manhattan House Call Veterinarian. How can people find out more about you and your practice?
So you can find out more about the practice by going to our website, citypetsvets.com. You can check out our handle, Dr. Amy City Pets. The book is available at your local bookshop. It's available in the library. Of course, you can buy it online as well.
All
But
right.
support your local
Yes.
bookshop.
Well, Amy, it's been a pleasure.
It's been my pleasure.
All right.